Generally speaking, we do not care for universalistic discourses, absolute imperatives, or moral obligations. We consider ourselves liberals, and we utterly abhor any form of extremism, not only in politics, but also when it comes to musical knowledge and its conscious consumption. Musical enjoyment, as such, must remain completely free and entirely liberated from any imposed dictates or dogmas. This is precisely why a standard review of ours would never open with a direct command to listen to a specific record. It simply wouldn't be in our nature, nor would it match our artistic chords. Unfortunately, however, we are not dealing with a standard review today. Furthermore, we must confess, we feel quite a bit of pressure in delivering this critique. Consequently, we find ourselves forced to activate an exceptional derogation of our own code, and we strongly urge everyone out there, hoping there are very few of you left, who has not already done so, to stop what you are doing and listen to the album Revolver by the Beatles. We make this exception for reasons that are as elevated as they are profoundly simple. We are standing face to face with one of the 10 most important musical albums of all time, an indisputable monument and a sacred heritage in the history of global music. Composed alongside its successor, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, during the golden 2-year span of 1966 and 1967, a legendary period in which our Fab Four acted as a collective artistic King Midas, turning everything they touched into gold. Revolver is, depending on your perspective, either the absolute pinnacle or very close to the peak of their entire discography. What might appear at first glance to a superficial listener as a decent, well-crafted pop album is, in truth, an extraordinary compendium of diverse attitudes, artistic mindsets, and contrasting stylistic approaches that fused together to give birth to something entirely unrepeatable. The maturity of these four lads from Liverpool had already begun to blossom in their previous record, Rubber Soul. It was there that we first caught glimpses of creeping psychedelia and progressive experimentation, evolving away from the basic, straightforward pop sound of Help and its contemporaries. Rubber Soul introduced folk elements and marked a subtle but clear transition toward a more pronounced rock soul, an artistic evolution that would shape the future of the band and ultimately seal their definitive legend. Everything in this masterpiece revolves around the two main creative fulcrums of the group, the deeply missed and immortal John Lennon and the, perhaps, still living Paul McCartney. These two absolute geniuses and dominant icons managed for a brief and magical period together to radically alter the very essence and stylings of music as we know it. John Lennon is the primary driving force behind the more oriental, hallucinating, and deeply lysergic component of this record. It is a dreamy, floating experience that reaches its absolute zenith in the celebrated closing track, Tomorrow Never Knows. From the very first second, the drone of the opening sitar literally drags us into the current, to steal a phrase from the lyrics themselves, opening the floodgates to a sensation of total, blissful disorientation, mirroring the psychological trip one experiences after consuming LSD. John's vocals, heavily modified in the studio through a Leslie speaker, combined with Ringo Starr's minimalist yet deeply hypnotic drumming, are artistically sublime, perfectly engineered to mesmerize the listener and cause them to lose themselves internally. However, the definitive acid song on Revolver, to borrow the exact terminology used by the author of Imagine, is undoubtedly She Said, She Said. This track was written by Lennon in complete isolation following an intense, drug-fueled party in Los Angeles, attended by the actor Peter Fonda and the entire lineup of the Byrds. The story goes that they spent the whole night huddled in a bathtub, deeply philosophizing about life and death. In this track, the crystalline sound of the six-string guitar and Lennon's vocals are flawlessly aligned in an aura of weightlessness and lightheartedness. A delicate composition that must never be dismissed as a simple, generic pop song like so many others on the market. Similar in its artistic intentions, though vastly superior in its sheer execution, is I'm Only Sleeping. This melancholic lullaby would later become a universal anthem for the joy of doing absolutely nothing. It etches itself permanently into the listener's mind from the very first playback, thanks to a melodic catchiness that stands far victory laps above the industry average and an absolutely flawless vocal harmony. As for the other plenipotentiary of the band, the incredibly active Paul McCartney, we can attribute to him the vast majority of the classic pop structures, as well as the lion's share of the brilliant avant-garde experimental ideas. If the definitive explanatory track for John Lennon's philosophy is the final song of the album, for Paul it is without a shadow of a doubt Eleanor Rigby. Its mournful, haunting string octet paints a vivid picture of popular folklore, balancing beautifully on the thin line between reality and fiction to deliver one of the greatest representations of human loneliness ever put to tape. We then find Here, There, and Everywhere, which was Paul's personal favorite creation on the record. This track fits perfectly into the classic love songs department, featuring sophisticated vocal arrangements that serve as a direct nod and creative challenge to the Beach Boys, their fiercest artistic competitors of the era. Then comes the universally famous and heavily overplayed Yellow Submarine. Despite its mainstream saturation, it must never be underestimated or dismissed as a mere children's song, because underneath its playful surface lies an incredible sonic structure. This is followed by Good Day Sunshine, 2 minutes of pure, unadulterated melodic, harmonic, and artistic ecstasy, cleverly disguised, as always, under an deceptive pop cover meant for the masses, to quote a famous line by Depeche Mode. But we would be making an absolutely monumental mistake if we failed to highlight the crucial roles played by the remaining members of the band, and most notably, George Harrison. Harrison shines brilliantly here, composing 2 of the absolute best tracks on Revolver. First, we have Taxman, which is arguably the most socially and politically engaged piece the quartet ever recorded. It boasts a driving, aggressive bass line and a chorus that will make your head spin. Written by the guitarist the moment he realized the extortionate tax rates in England were devouring an exorbitant slice of the band's hard-earned wealth. Second is Love You To, a vivid, breathing manifestation of Harrison's deep immersion into Indian classical music, cultivated under the mentorship of the master Ravi Shankar. This track is a spiritual journey very similar to Tomorrow Never Knows in its cosmic intentions, yet completely different in its practical execution. With the exotic tones of the sitar placed squarely in the foreground, Harrison's vocals emulate the traditional Khyal style of native Asian singers, rising up like a divine ethereal echo from a higher level of consciousness and being. Finally, there is the palpable, crucial contribution of their drummer, Ringo Starr. Ringo acted as the essential human glue, holding together the 2 primary clashing poles of Lennon and McCartney, while also anchoring the brilliant, borderline outsider personality of Harrison. Possessing a less flamboyant but immensely steady personality, Ringo was uniquely capable of serving as the ultimate trait d'union between wildly conflicting musical influences. With his impeccably precise, understated, and flawless technique, he perfectly served the most cited, analyzed, and listened to band of the modern era. What else can be said about Revolver? It is a sweeping cross-section of popular culture rather than a mere long-playing vinyl record. It stands as an eternal monument to that beautiful art form, which many still dismiss as just music, falsely claiming it doesn't deserve a dedicated exhibition hall in the world's premier cultural institutions. This record is a historical artifact that has kept its brilliant light completely untarnished for over half a century, and it will undoubtedly continue to project that same blinding brilliance for another 50 years and far beyond. With this monumental work, the Beatles officially certified their grand entrance into the cultural Olympus. With their very next record, they would climb the remaining steps to seize the absolute highest peak of the mountain. And from that untouchable summit, they still look down upon 60 years of music, regardless of its genre, quality, or origin, with the absolute certainty, and perhaps a healthy dose of polite British arrogance, that nothing in this world will ever displace them even a single millimeter from their eternal throne. The Song Hunters' official score, 95 out of 100.